Max Weber famously defined the state as an organization with a monopoly on the legitimate use of force within a territory. This definition of a state is so widespread, I presented it virtually without caveat in the last video. This video is about some caveats and a little nuance. First, I just wanted to mention the big difference between the definition I gave you and Max Weber's definition. I spoke that the function of a state is to provide public goods, and Weber talked about its monopoly on the legitimate use of force. For me, the distinction here is that Weber's definition just doesn't go far enough. Weber talks about the use of force, which is a fundamental part of any state. States are, in one way, fundamentally coercive. No one really wants to pay their taxes after all. But the focus on the use of force leaves out the fact that states often have really important economic functions and other social functions as well. So that's why I talked about public goods as opposed to the use of force. More generally, Weber and Sam Huntington both see state powers as a positive thing, what we would call governance, and offer more detailed definitions as to what good states actually should be. In Economy and Society, Weber gave us the concept of a Weberian bureaucracy. Weberian bureaucracies have a bunch of characteristics, but they fundamentally come down to the idea that bureaucracies are impersonal. In other words, positions and services don't depend on personal connections. And they're also layered, so there's a hierarchy and a division of labor within the organization. The job of a bureaucrat, then, is to develop and implement rules and regulations based on their expert skills and the training they've received. Weber saw these bureaucracies as a form of rational legal authority that could produce the most efficient outcomes for a state because they provide technical expertise and continuity over time. Huntington, in Political Order in Changing Societies, also sees states as necessary organizations. They allow polities to incorporate new groups and remain stable. But Huntington provides an alternate way of defining and classifying them. He identifies 4 dimensions around which states, and organizations generally, vary. Good, or strong states, have a high degree of institutionalization, which can be broken down into adaptability, complexity, autonomy, and coherence. State institutions tend to become more institutionalized over time because they've had to adapt and incorporate a greater variety of changes in groups. Both Weber and Huntington provide key insights into how states can and should function, but they both offer top-down views of politics. The state is something that acts on or towards its people. Other theories and concepts of the state focus more on the relationship between state and society. Michael Mann, in The Sources of Social Power, draws a distinction between a state's despotic power, that's its ability to impose its will on society, and a state's infrastructural power, that's its ability to implement policy through society. Infrastructural power characterizes most modern successful states, but it requires not only rational organization, but also a strong relationship between state and non-state organizations. State policies are not fully implemented unless they are accepted by society or seen as legitimate, which gives citizens agency in this process. Joel Migdal, in Strong Societies and Weak States, puts this in the context of post-colonial Africa and the Middle East. Migdal notes that in countries where state institutions are weak, social institutions are often strong. Whether we're talking about tribes, NGOs, or just a hiking club down the street, these organizations often exhibit the complexity, adaptability, and sometimes hierarchy that Weber and Huntington praise in the state. Migdal argues that one reason for the weakness of post-colonial states, then, is that they are in fact built on colonial institutions that, while they were highly coercive, were also disconnected from the strong societies that preceded them. All of these theories vary in the weight they give state versus social power, but all focus on 2 key attributes of states: incorporation and mobilization. States need to incorporate new social groups in order to avoid unrest. In other words, they need to bring social classes, ethnic groups, young people into the political process. They also need to mobilize citizens around their goals in order to successfully implement policy, just to get the job done. And over the next few weeks, we're going to examine how states vary in their ability to do this, beginning with getting a better understanding of how we know we're actually looking at a strong or a weak state.